Welcome to the 14th reading of my memoir. Jenny, are you there? In September 1949, I had made the transfer to North Street Junior School along with Christine. My new school was a long walk along North Station Road, half the distance to the railway station at the end of John Harper Street. Constructed of red brick, it featured an attractive bell tower at the top of a turret where the headmaster's study could be found. On my first day, I proudly wore my new school uniform, navy blue gym slip over a white, long-sleeved blouse, topped off with a navy blue gabardine raincoat. I glued myself to Christine at the two-seat desk in our new classroom until a few days later, someone escorted me to a different room and told me to stay there. No one gave me an explanation for the move, but it turned out to be due to my problems with arithmetic. Even though I missed Christine, I settled down, but the sole reason for my initial success was due to my teacher, Mr. Fuchs, who, as soon as he heard me read out loud, made no secret of the fact that he favored me over the other children. He gave me a special job to do, which put me into a role I found rather daunting. When he left the room for any reason, he positioned me in front of the class with a book and instructed me to read out loud to them until he returned. The children used this opportunity to fool around, jumping all over the desks and not paying any attention at all. I bravely stood there reading, trying to make my voice heard over the din. The louder they became, the louder I made my voice. I stood there with my book, a soldier guarding Mr. Fuchs's fortress. On his return, they scurried back to their seats, and quietness and order resumed. The fortress protected and safe, he smiled at me, the two of us in league with each other against the whole class. He never chastised me for my inability to control his ragtag army, but I wished I could, for his sake. I loved to read and write and easily won the spelling contests. Since reading opened the door to learning so much at the beginning level, initially it gave me a false impression of how well I was doing because I wasn't doing very well at all, and not only in arithmetic. In the playground, I often found myself alone, invisible. Since my removal from Christine's class, I hardly saw her at school. She had other friends. A couple of older girls acted as playground monitors. They watched out for hurt children and took them up to the school's first aid room. I soon realized that a child with a cut or graze was fussed over, but try as I might, I couldn't get them to notice me, even though I deliberately fell all over the place, attempting to injure myself. A magical solution, at least for a while, gave me some much-needed attention. At home, I discovered a small box of black magic chocolates hidden in a sideboard drawer. It's feasible to presume my mother stole them from the hospital, as sweets were still rationed. She let David and me have one every day, and we were sad when the box emptied. We liked dark chocolate, new in the shops. My mother kept the empty box in case it came in handy. Out of curiosity, I poked around in the drawer after a few days and could hardly believe my eyes. The box contained chocolates again. I called her to see, and she expressed surprise. "Fancy that," she exclaimed. "Well, they don't call them black magic for nothing." Once again she handed the chocolates out, and a few days later they magically reappeared. I mentioned the magic going on in my house to some boys in my class, and they asked to see it for themselves. Like my mother, in her young days, I found boys less complicated to deal with than most girls, and 3 or 4 of them at least talked to me. My house became a stopping-off point for the boys on their way home from school. They received a chocolate for their efforts, and I gained some much-needed popularity. Unfortunately, my mother couldn't keep the magic going indefinitely. My celebrity status at an end, the boys lost their interest in me. One day, a dense fog enveloped the town. I walked out into the front of the school to make my way home, but didn't know right from left. I must have dawdled out of school because all the other children had long gone. I stood alone in the playground, waiting for the mist to clear. My mother told the story, on and off for years, how she came to the school to find me, how I was lost in the fog, how she wandered into the playground calling, "Jenny, are you there?" and how she gradually recognized me by the outline of the little pixie hat she knitted for me. That story kept me trapped in its setting, perpetually stuck in the fog, and annoyed that it seemed her strongest memory of me. "Do you remember, dear?" she'd say, and I'd sigh and die inside. I did indeed enter a strange fog in my mind at that time. My mother never knew the thoughts that assailed me as I stood in the assembly hall with all the other pupils each morning before classes began. Mr. Fuchs may have favoured me with attention over my gift of the written word, but he appeared powerless to save me from the stupid part of me. In those early days of school, arithmetic was called sums, and the word filled me with dread. It became a huge aspect of school to fear, added to the sound of the milk crates rattling and a teacher still hounding me every day for refusing to drink the sickly contents of those little bottles. I considered the plight I found myself in every day, facing an unknown language no one could help me decipher, fractured in two, the 2 different parts, complete opposites. Which one the real me? Because of this dilemma, Mr. Fuchs thought me stubborn by not learning my sums the way my classmates did. He often sent me to the headmaster's study in the turret for a talking to. It all came to an abrupt halt a few days into the last term before the summer holidays. As I undressed for bed one night, my mother noticed angry red raised marks covering my arms and asked me to explain how they got there. "I don't know," was my excuse for an answer, and of course she didn't believe me. I hadn't wanted to say anything because I feared my father's reaction. Reluctantly, I described the blows that rained down on me from the long wooden stick I called a ruler. It must have been a big ruler to have administered so much damage, but I was a small child, so I expect it wasn't too difficult a job. I don't know what my father said or did, but I imagine he went to the school and did what he did best, explode. I never set foot in North Street Junior again. Despite my problems, I wanted to go back. I'd been learning the violin, and I hoped I might at last get to play something better than a little triangle in the school band. After all, as Dindin frequently told me, music was in my blood. The question of the book prize consumed my thoughts. Mr. Fuchs had displayed it up on a high shelf and said it would be awarded to the top pupil at the end of the school year. I'm sure that every child's eyes feasted on it, claiming it for themselves, but in my mind, that book belonged to me, if for no other reason than the fact that Mr. Fuchs loved me. I also wondered how he managed without me. Who is reading for him when he has to leave the classroom? Why doesn't he wonder where I am? Why doesn't he come and see me? My heart grieved for him. After the summer holidays, I knew I wouldn't be going back because my father announced we were packing up the house and moving to Mildenhall in the county of Suffolk. My mother walked me to Brown Owl's house to say goodbye. While my mum chatted to her, I stood on the doorstep, shuffling my feet in impatience. I didn't care about Brown Owl or that I was leaving brownies. North Street Junior loomed across the road, and all I cared about was that I hadn't said goodbye to Mr. Fuchs. Soon it would be too late. He wouldn't know where to find me. I didn't get to say goodbye to Christine either. Why hadn't my mother told her mother of our move? Why hadn't she given her our new address so Christine could write to me? Perhaps my father forbade that too. It's possible. Then again, although we were only moving a distance of 2.5 hours by road to our new home, it was considered a fair distance back then. My mother may have imagined we would never see any of our friends again. Best to cut the ties and not look back. Thanks for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.